Hi, I'm Bill Kennedy with the Ardan Podcast, and today our very special guest is Matt Ryer, all the way from England, right, Matt? You're living in London?
That's right.
Nice.
Yeah.
Got
nice
it.
to be here. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for accepting our invitation. I'm so excited to talk to you. And we've met before, and we've talked a little bit, but I don't think we've ever really talked about how you got into the industry and kind of where you are today. And I have to imagine it's going to be a fun hour. So what I like our guests to kind of start off with, because we try to create a timeline, is to take 2 minutes and give everybody a sense of like where you are right now, what you're doing right now, so we know where we're kind of leading ourselves to.
Okay, yeah. So, well, I'm building projects. It's kind of what I love doing, creating and coming up with ideas and trying to solve problems and use tech to do that in various ways. So I'm doing that at the moment. We have a few products that we're sort of just sort of at the phase of now starting to market and start to talk about and grow a little bit. And that's Pace and our Firesearch product, which is a search thing that came out of that. And, you know, I like having sort of diverse things to work on. So I have other ideas and projects that I'm working on as well, trying to get them going. Like I have a Bitbar project, which is a put the output of any script into the Mac OS menu bar. So it's like it's great for hackers. Like you can just make any little program and get information in your Mac menu bar. And I'm doing a rewrite of that because that was Objective-C, which it's kind of like a dead language a little bit now, and I couldn't help with the project. So we've managed to find a way to do a rewrite in Go, which is very exciting. So I'm doing that too. And that's it really. I like that process, building those bits and pieces and getting them, hopefully solving real problems for people. And I also do the Go Time podcast, as you know, which is a lot of fun to do. And you know that I get to meet amazing people and get to speak to some really interesting people, which is such an honor and a pleasure to do. You know, it's great.
So I want to explore this at some point in the next hour, but I have always seen you as a serial entrepreneur. And for me, it is ridiculously impressive how you're able to identify product, then build it, where you're helping. Like Ardan is a consulting company, but we're always talking about product. And we're always like, that's not going to work. That might work. Well, we can't dog food that. And then I turn around and suddenly you got Pace. And before that, you had Machinebox. And I'm scratching my head. And I want to explore that. I don't want answers to that yet. But I'm going to be somehow trying to figure out how you're able to identify product. And we all know an idea is an idea. You execute like massively on these things too. So I'm excited to kind of explore all of that. And I definitely want to get to the Red Sox at some point with your I want to get there. All these things that I think are super fascinating and interesting. And for people out there that are looking to build product and want to be an entrepreneur, I think there's something there that I really want to explore with you. Now, with all that being said, right, I want to go back in time, Matt. I want to go way back in time.
Are you going to buy Bitcoin?
Let's go even farther back, Matt. And I want you to think about kind of one of your earliest memories of maybe programming, not necessarily the first time you worked with a computer, or how about the first time you created something and the feelings you had about that, and how old you were. Let's get some dates involved too.
Okay, well, I was programming from when I was very little, and I hear this story a few times. You hear it quite a lot, actually. I was with my dad. He was always interested in computers. So we always had a computer around. So it was really early adopters. And I'm talking like a Spectrum, Sinclair Spectrum, and then later Amigas, and before PCs later. So we always had computers around, and I just loved it. We would copy the code from computer magazines. So there used to be this Amiga format magazine that I would get, and it would have programs in there that you could just copy out, basic programs. As long as you typed it correctly, you would have like a game or a program or a tool or just something. And then, of course, you could change it and tweak it and break it and kind of see how it worked and what it was really doing. And I was just hooked on that process. I think I was about 6 years old when I used to do this. I would type. My dad would read it. I remember he'd lie on the couch reading from the magazine, and then I would be typing into the computer.
So he had you typing the code so he didn't have to do it, right?
I guess so, yeah. I remember one time he was saying, you know, quote marks. He would call them 6699, and I remember him reading this out, and every time he said it, I was pressing 66 and 99. So obviously it didn't work, the program, and there was at the end of the whole program it didn't work at all, and it was too much to go back and change it. So I just couldn't be bothered. But we'd have little mistakes like that, and it was all kind of like fun process. Like doing that with my dad was like the thing that I think was a big pull for me. And then, but sometimes we'd type it incorrectly, if you could imagine that, and it would work. And then you'd have like a little pool game or something that you could, you know, knock balls around and things. And then we'd go and say, well, how could we make the pockets bigger to make the game easier? Can we just have no pockets? Could we have no sides? So it's like a pool table with no sides, you know. And it was that kind of experimental process that I just loved. It was the kind of controlling this world, creating these worlds, and then being able to change them and experiment in them that was kind of amazing.
I'm curious about your father just a little bit then. What was he an engineer? Was he doing technical things? Just a little bit about what your dad was doing at the time, I guess.
Yes. No, he was a miner, actually. I'm from Mansfield in England. It's a small town near Nottingham. You know, Robin Hood. And that's a mining town. So there were lots of pits in that area. And so that was why he moved there. He's actually from the south of England. But he just always had a love of these computers. It was he felt like it was the future, and no one believed him. You know, they just thought it was a thing that you play with. But he could see that there was potential in this thing. He believed they were going to be important. So that would justify it, because often my mum would say, he's been on the computer too long, he needs to go outside now, you know, which is a classic. I've never had to go outside now, you know, like learning the computers was the thing. I don't have any skills of being outside, but I don't need them, you know.
Do you have siblings? Do you
Yes.
have siblings that you had to compete with dad's time on, or was this your thing with dad? Like, you're the one who showed interest, right? Like, I'm curious about that.
Yeah, actually, the computer was always my Christmas present, but it was always with the caveat of, you have to share this with everybody. Everyone gets to use this. And that was just kind of normal then. Obviously, if that happened now, I'd kick off. Like, if I get a gift, that's my gift. I'm not sharing that. But yeah, so it was that. I remember always dominating the computer for sure. But that's because there wasn't that much interest in that. But I would build little things for my brothers. Like, I remember once building a traffic light system so they could play cars, and the screen would be red, and then it would go, you know, it would change through the colours to green and let them go. So that was kind of...
So you're the oldest? You were the oldest brother? Are you the oldest in the...
Yeah.
So you had some authority already kind of to take ownership?
Yes, and it was kind of how I would join in playing the game because I wasn't that interested in playing cars, maybe. But I still wanted, I don't know, I still wanted to join in with them. So I would do it by that, and build little text adventure games and silly little things, really. But it was just so much fun, and really the imagination was the limit on that. Even though it was basic code and very rudimentary graphics, it still was just so much fun.
All right, so you're starting this you're saying around 6 years old, which puts you. I have to use U.S. like school system terms. I don't know how much they apply, so correct me. But that would be elementary school in the U.S., right? Like we did elementary school through 6th grade, which I think puts you maybe about 12 or something. So I guess maybe 12 is middle school, but you're doing this at an early age. So I can't imagine that your elementary school has computers in it yet. So I have to maybe imagine that when you get to that middle school, there's got to be some computer classes at that point. Like, when did you even bother to do anything from a high school to middle school with computers? Because you had to be super advanced ahead of everybody at that point.
Yeah, actually it was. Because that would be what I was doing for fun. So actually we did in our elementary school, we call it infant school, we did have a computer, and it was this BBC Micro computer, which was kind of, I don't know, you can Google them. It's amazing. There's actually a bot now, a Twitter bot, where you can give it some code and it will run it and return a GIF of the program. So it shows you, and there's some amazing things people are doing there. But I do have an early memory where I think I was about 6 or 7, and the computer had broken, and somehow one of the other kids knew that I liked computers, so they sent for me. And I remember someone coming into class and saying, can Matthew come with us? I used to be called Matthew. And they'd say, yeah, we need Matthew to help. And I remember being really nervous because I was probably in trouble for something. So I went to this computer, and I remember it was just some program has just crashed, basically. And it was a computer I'd never seen before. But I remember that it had a similar keyboard layout, the QWERTY one. And I recognised like the break key. It used to be a break key where you could just press it and it would interrupt the program because it was all interpreted BASIC. And so I pressed that key and it broke into the program. And then I just thought, I don't know what I'm doing, but I'll just try what I do at home. And I typed list. And then it was like the Matrix, all the code just really fast. I don't know why that was even a command. Like, it's no use to that. You type list, and so it was like the Matrix, all the code shot across the screen, and then I just typed run, and it started working again.
Wow.
And so I basically just restarted
it.
It's the classic, have you tried turning it off and on again? But I think to the teachers I can't imagine what that would have looked like.
Yeah, that must have been mind-blowing. Wow. So I'm one of the things I want to explore while you're in middle school and high school are kind of two things. I want to explore, were you still kind of heads down, and I think maybe you already said this, like computers was kind of it for you even through junior and high school, or were you doing other things like sports or music, or was there something you were splitting your time with?
Yes, I was always interested in music, so I do, and still to this day, play and write music. And I see there's a few people, not everybody, but a lot of programmers also have musical interest as well. I feel like there's some kind of synergy between those two things in some way, but I don't really know. So yeah, I would do that. I would do a lot of music. I was in bands. I started a band in school as well. And actually the IT lessons at school weren't very good because we didn't have like there wasn't a dedicated curriculum, I don't think, yet. I think my year group may have been the first year to even have IT classes in the school.
We're talking like, what grade are we talking and what year are we talking? Because that helps everybody.
Yeah, I think around 96, maybe, around then. Yeah. But the thing is, they weren't IT teachers. They were like a geography teacher that had an interest, so they had to do the IT class or something. So, bless them, I kind of already knew more than them. And I really don't like saying that, but it's definitely true. I mean, we do like spreadsheets. That's what the lessons were. They were like how to use spreadsheets and desktop publishing. Remember desktop publishing? And so it was things like this, which I was already very familiar with. And I remember, like, at one point I was hand coding HTML and CSS to build a website for the music teacher. And again, it was another one of those times where it must have looked great. You know what I mean? Like, but for me, I was just, yeah. And most people were nice about it. Some people really didn't like it. One of the teachers in particular really didn't like the fact that I was doing that kind of thing. And we actually would say, stop doing that. You need to do your exercise, which is make a heading and some text in a Word document instead. So that really put me off kind of education. I think that's what happened at that point. I was really put off, and so I didn't bother with IT classes at school much. I would just go and probably mess around a bit too much and do pranks like in Word. You know, the auto change where you could change words. There's a setting where you could do it. So I'd put it in so that "and" would change to "the" and things like that. So people are trying to type the work and the sentences don't make any sense after. I resisted.
I can hear somebody screaming in the background, "Matt!" every time something was not behaving. Matt!
Yeah, that's true. It's true. Actually, what they would do, I remember one time, because I would do it and then kind of go and just watch from afar and just see what happened. And I remember the teachers would just turn the computer off and say, "That one's broken. Just use a different one." I resisted the urge of using expletives and things, by the way, which I was very proud of myself at the time. Like, 'cause that would be very easy to do. I much preferred the fact you didn't really notice until you read it back and it's just gibberish language.
Oh, you keep it's subtle, so it lasts longer, right? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. That's it.
So
That's it.
I'm really interested in the idea of the music, because I have to imagine by the time you're in your last 3 or 4 years of schooling before university, that you're dedicating more time to your music than you are the computers. Like, how are you splitting your time at that point? I mean, you started at 6. Like, the passion's there, you're loving it, but I have to imagine music starts to take over in those last few years of, I'm going to call it high school, but your last few years.
Yeah, it probably did. I mean, at that point, programming was just a thing I could do. So I would do it when I needed to do it for some reason. So in a sense, it probably became less of a novelty and an exciting thing. Having said that, I still to this day am excited when things work, and when I can actually make something happen. I still have that same feeling of satisfaction when code works. So it would have never left me for sure. But yeah, I did start to do more, and I was socialising more as well with people. And so, yeah, I think my time did get split there. We had like I said, we had a school band that we started, like a indie pop band playing like Oasis songs. I don't know if you know Oasis, and Beatles songs and things like this. So that took a lot of time, and it was a very rewarding process as well. And again, I think it's the same. It's sort of get to be creative. A lot of the reasons why I love programming or why I love music as well. And it's, I don't know, I just find it to be I think they're very similar. It feels very similar to me, not just because they both involve keyboards, but for other reasons.
Well, there's technical aspects and creative aspects to both. So I'm now okay. So you're about to graduate. You have to make some decisions about university or what your next steps is. Like, what year are we talking now, and what's going on to your head? Is it heads down, I'm going to pursue computers as a career, music as a career, or I just don't know still what I want to do?
Yeah, well, I think because I was put off from the IT classes, I think that sort of spoiled my attitude towards education. So I actually didn't go to university at all. I stayed on at school. There's an option in the UK to stay on for a couple of extra years at school and do additional, just sort of carry on and do additional things. And it's this higher level, slightly higher level education. So I was doing that, but at that time I was kind of doing websites for people on the side, like little jobs, usually for free. And we also still had our band, and we wanted to pursue that. So yeah, university was just, I kind of regret it in some ways, but the decision at the time was I just wasn't interested. I think because the IT education I had, well, they didn't teach me anything, essentially. That put me off, I think. And so I was just dismissed it. And nobody was able to nobody convinced me. Some people tried, but not very hard. So I just didn't bother with that after.
So you're kind of starting out of the gate as an entrepreneur, because you're kind of starting your own little business, building websites that are giving you, I have to imagine, enough money to then be able to do your music. I'm also assuming you're trying to get paid gigs with the music at the same time. Right?
At the time, I made more money playing in pubs, which was we'd get paid in like Coke and pizza. But the value of it was a lot more than I was getting from doing websites. I was doing websites, but just for free, because I didn't really know that you could like charge money for it. It was a fun thing that I liked doing, so that's why I was doing it for people. In fact, I was convincing them, I should have a website. So if anything, I had to pay them to do. I'd give them a slice of pizza to do it, so let me do it.
So what happens? Okay, I have to imagine that something happens where you're like, okay, I have to like start generating money. I have to kind of find my path in terms of being self-supportive. It's not happening with the band. I can't give away websites anymore. So, like, how much time from those couple extra years to you getting, I'm going to call it your first real job, right? Like, what happens in your life that makes you realize that I have to now shift these gears and do the next thing?
Yes. Well, there was a parallel track, because what happened was I got paid for something, and that was the first time I just had my own money, because I was just living at home with my family. Like, my brother had gone working and was making money, and my sister had actually left to join the RAF, which is the British Air Force, the Royal Air Force, and so they were making money, and I was just not very interested in that for whatever reason. And I did get paid one time for something, just a small amount, and I was able to then get something from a computer. And then I was like, oh, I get it. That's why it's good to have this stuff.
How old do you think you were? Yeah. How old were you think when you had that moment? I'm trying to, are you at this point 18, 19? We're talking like 90, 98 maybe, like trying to gauge.
I think about 2000.
Okay.
It was. Yeah, and about that age. Yeah. And then there was a job in the newspaper, which was a web developer job. And I went to the interview and got the job.
This was in the little town of Nottingham?
Yeah, Mansfield.
Mansfield.
It's even smaller.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, so it's amazing, and it was a little agency basically. It was an ISP it called itself, because it did dial up, it did everything. It was like you could have dial up from it. They had a online shop, so they had like an e-commerce element to it, and yeah, we were just sort of there building websites.
And what did you get paid, Matt? What was this first job in 2000 to build websites at a small ISP in Mansfield?
£13,000 a year.
13. Nice.
But I tell you what, that was basically £500 a month of just cash that was mine after tax, and that was life changing for me because I've never had any money before. So yeah, and it was minimum wage actually. It was that was the lowest I could have possibly got paid legally, you know. And actually, it was funny because I had quite a bad experience. Well, I had a good experience and a bad experience there. The good experience, if we focus on the positives first, it was where I first was able to see code using ASP served through localhost dynamically. So all my programs before had just been interpreted or things that you run. It wasn't web-based. And I used to write ASP. I remember writing ASP pages and sort of just either serving them directly in the browser or serving them through a web server but not being processed as ASP. So the code would just show up in the browser. And it was really infuriating. And it was just a gap in my knowledge. I didn't know how you make it not just give the code but run it. And there was a guy there who I'm still friends with, Alan Mead, and he knew about internet information services and was able to help me have it served through localhost. And that was another one of those moments that I remember that day. It was like a significant day for me because it was like, now I can do this. It's endless. All the possibilities now are endless.
It was that door you needed
yeah.
open. It was that mind-blowing door that just expanded your universe like tenfold. Yeah. So I want to get to. So you've got this first job. How long are you at this first job? You're there like a year. You're there a couple of years.
Yeah, it's a year. I think about a year and a half. It didn't end well, and that was the negative experience that I was talking about. But essentially, what happened was, my boss said, I'm going to give you an 11% pay rise if you work really hard for this month in September. So if you work really hard in September, you have to come in early, you have to work late, every day, weekends if you need it. If you do all that, you'll get an 11% pay rise, which he explained is an enormous pay rise. And so I did it. I was excited. I was like, okay, I've got a mission. I'm going to do this. And I was really kind of behind it. And I couldn't wait to tell my dad that I was going to get this 11% pay rise, which I'd been told was a great pay rise, which of course it is, depending on your starting salary, of course.
Right.
But still,
10%, that's a lot. And this was 11.
Yeah. This was 11, so that's like Spinal Tap kind of pay rise, isn't it? This pay rise goes up to 11. Yeah. Why don't you just make 10 a bigger? This one goes to 11. That wasn't me doing an impression of Spinal Tap. This is just how I talk. So it was like the last day of September, and I was so excited to tell my dad, and he was driving me to the office, and he said, "Oh, by the way, congratulations on the pay rise." And I was like, "What? How did you know about that?" He said it was in the newspaper. So I was like, "What?" He said, "Yeah, minimum wage is going up 11%.
Oh my God!
Yeah.
No way!
Yeah.
Oh my
Yeah.
God! So, oh my God, Matt. So what happens now? You've got to be livid.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. It dawned on me what had happened, And yeah, I just said, okay, don't take me to the office. I'm not going. And I just didn't go. I sent him an email just explaining what he'd done, just the facts of what had happened, and I just said, so therefore you're probably never going to see me again. And I haven't seen him again since.
Wow.
So yeah, that was
wow.
And I feel like kind of like that experience didn't set me up for great trust relationships and things like this. Like, it's it probably did some damage early. But yeah, it was.
My heart feels heavy right now. Like,
yeah,
like that is. I don't even have the words to describe how horrifically immoral and unethical that was. My heart hurts.
I know.
Oh my God, and at your age, I mean, at the end of the day, that's a trauma. At your age,
yeah,
that's a trauma.
Yeah,
I mean, how are you supposed to take anybody on face value ever again when something like that? Oh my God. So I imagine you told your dad what happened, right? Mm-hmm. What was your dad's advice at that point? Do you remember?
Yeah, he was just supportive. I mean, my upbringing was my mum's like I would describe her as a rebel. She was like they were very interested in social justice, and my mum was a social worker from North Wales. So like she grew up in real kind of poverty, and so the values of how you interact with people were just paramount, really, because in some ways it's all they had. So they were extremely supportive, and my mum had this sort of slightly punk attitude of just like, that's it, almost like 2 fingers up and that's it. You don't get to do that to people and get away with it. So they were very supportive of my reaction, which was just, I'm not going anymore then, And plus it was only 500, well, I would have been more thinking about it, but it was only £500 a month that was losing, as it were. So, it's not like leaving Google for,
well, I don't think it's the money as much as
reason.
you didn't have people to feed. You weren't in a situation where you had to keep other people alive. So, but I think that's irrelevant because maybe you have to hang out there for another week, but you were leaving one way or the other. You just had the opportunity to leave, not come back. So we're half an hour in. There's so much I want to get to. So I'm going to jump a little bit. I want you to give me how do we get from this moment to your Bitbar moment? Because I know it's an incredibly successful project, and maybe not everybody's heard, right? And you had that moment when at least the readers of a particular magazine found all out about it. I want to kind of get there because I'm wondering if that is the beginning of maybe you having success again and feeling like, you know what, I'm good. I can do this. Look at this product I built. I mean, was there a product that had as much success prior to that? Like, I'd love to try to jump this in the next 5 minutes.
Okay. Well, there is something significant that happened to me before that. After I had a few other jobs, and I did get other jobs and met lovely people that treated me nicely, and so I had some also really nice experiences as well. But then I was still doing the band, and actually we got a stroke of luck with a local radio station, and they started playing our music, and then they started putting us on like these big tours. So we toured the UK a little bit, playing in arenas to big crowds. Like we played in Edinburgh Castle.
What was the name of your band?
It was called Traffic with a P and a H, and then we changed it later to Stolen. So it's kind of like...
And what year are we talking now? 2002, 3?
2004.
2004. You're playing in big arenas. You're opening for what bands? Anything that?
Well, it was like these radio stations do these big like summer pop events, and so it was basically all the top bands in the charts at the time, and yeah, we're just a nobody knows who we are. We just got lucky, and then they liked us, and then they were helping us for some reason, and also the manager was like a kind of pushy. It would take chances and take risks, and they paid off sometimes. And that I learned a bit about risk taking from that. And yeah, we were just playing these arenas. The biggest one was, we played in Edinburgh Castle. That stands out as a memory for sure, because if you Google that on Google Images, or DuckDuckGo if you prefer, it's a beautiful venue. And we also played a festival.
So you're touring with all these bands? You're touring?
Yeah.
You're on tour buses? So you're living that rock and roll life for that summer?
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we were
we could do an entire show about those months.
This is where I learned about imposter syndrome, because before I knew about it, because at the time we would even introduce ourselves as we're like imposters. In fact, some people thought that was our band name. We thought, we just felt like imposters here, because we didn't have a record deal. We aren't these big famous bands. We're not in the charts or anything. We're just there, and no one can quite figure out why, but we were there. So I took from that you feel like an imposter, but you can't let that stop you. You just have to get on with it. There's an opportunity here. So just get on with it. And we would have a lot of fun at these venues. And the audience was great, because they were always there they played the role brilliantly. So like you'd come out on stage and they'd all be screaming. Like, you know what I mean? Like it was just kind of crazy, really, really crazy. The biggest one
Matt,
was,
I tell people, I tell people that be the imposter, but when you get on stage, you have to be the authority.
Right. Exactly.
Like for the 20, 30 hour that you're on stage, you've got to shift your mind. Once you get off, you can go back to it all day long.
You might do 20 or 30 hours, Bill. I've seen you. You can do that. I do about 10 mins if I can. I even don't say the full word minutes. I shorten that to mins. That's how lazy I am.
So this whole thing is over the summer in 2004, right? This is like a 3-month kind of. So now you guys think that this is it. We're going to get a record label. We're going to record an album. Like this is going on in your head in 2004. So what happened?
Well, we didn't get a record label, because it turns out no record companies go to those kinds of gigs to look for new talent. So we were in the wrong place, really. We weren't doing it the right way. So we didn't get a record label. But what happened was, we go back home, and that was difficult. Going back home after, we lived together in this little house in this very poor town, little village actually, off Mansfield. And we were just, we didn't have any money. We were living off, my girlfriend at the time was working in a checkout. She was at university and she was at a checkout. So we were living off that, really. And it was about 6 months to a year after that because I wrote the songs that we were playing at the venues, so I got songwriting royalties. And because the gigs were so big, I got, just completely out of the blue, I got like a big chunk of cash, just kind of almost, I didn't really expect it at all. And we were able to leave that house and move to Nottingham. And then I could get a proper job. Like, it was hard to even get another job because I was so remote. I couldn't even afford like the bus fare to get to Nottingham and back for a month before I'd have then been paid. You know what I mean? Like, genuinely wouldn't have been able to take a job, or if I took a job, I'd have had to say, "Can I have some of the money up front so I can pay the bus to come to the job?" But then
that's horrible, right? Like, you need money to make money. You don't even have enough money for, like, that's That's despair for me. When people can't have the things that they need, not want,
Right.
need, because they don't have the dollars. That bothers me beyond belief.
Yes.
It's horrific.
It is.
So
I
this-
agree. Yeah.
This check shows up and now gives you the capital you need to do what you need to do. So you go back and you get it, and now you're back in you're doing computers again.
Yeah. And working for a company in Nottingham, much nicer company, much more grown-up company actually, and it was a lovely experience. And then my girlfriend at the time got a job at the Science Museum in London, and then I had to move to London, and so that was like a big step. It was only 6 months after we'd moved to Nottingham, so life was really changing fast. And
So now what year is it? It's still 2004, end of 2004?
yeah, I think it's 2005 now, because this was 2005 2006 time, and then London. I'd visited a few times, but we just had to move there. She already had the job. I did an interview at BT, which is British Telecom, the telecom company here, and it was like an open day kind of interview, and this was before like the iPhone, but they said, assume you have like presence, you know where location, you know where they are, a good internet connection. Assume everyone's got this on their phone, and then come up with ideas for things you could build. So we came up with this idea just in the group of finding a hotel quickly. And this was like, and we were even saying, because we know their location, we could show them hotels that are nearby. Like we thought, that's so obvious now, but we invented it in that interview.
Nice.
Yeah, well, you know, but that's what I love, is that process of that sort of ideation and being creative.
Yeah, but Matt, now I got another sick feeling in my stomach, because was BT bringing all these young people together for free to feed them ideas about what they could do on the internet? Because you walk away and you got no rights to these ideas, and some of them could have been incredibly unique.
Yeah, I don't think so. Only because knowing the people, I met the people properly after, because I got the job. Good news.
Okay.
But the reason I got the job, he said, was, in these situations, everyone's kind of competing for to show off, to put themselves in the best light, of course, because you're in competition. They were only going to hire, there were like 10 of us, and they were only going to hire 2 or something like this. So everyone's competing. And there was a young lad there who, the night before, there was some booking problem with his hotel, and he was stuck without a hotel. And I was saying, can you just tell us about this? Just tell us more about it. I was just asking him questions. Because I had this mindset of like, the point of this is, as a team, we've got to come up with this thing. Naively or not, but they told me after they loved that, because it wasn't driven by personal ego. It was about working as a team to find the best thing. You win as a team, or you all lose as a team. And they liked that, and that's why they said they then offered me the job.
I think, honestly, for me, hearing that is that you had a real sincerity and empathy for solving the problem. It wasn't about you. It was about, in fact, I would even venture to say you probably got lost in the process. You forgot why you were there.
Yeah, maybe.
You were just so ingrained in understanding the problem that and I think maybe that's what they saw, because I see that in you, like even today, like, what is the problem? What is the problem you're having? And you're trying to fix it in one way or the other. Maybe they saw that.
Yeah, I like to think that that's the case, because there were definitely people there that were dominating a little bit, and I was even interrupting them to say, we're doing this particular thing, this find a hotel quickly. He had this exact situation, so he's like the user. I'd been reading about. I remember I was into that. I was into learning about it's kind of Web 2.0, the whole thing of being user-centric and being obsessed with what the user experience is and things like this. So that was very fresh in my mind and has never left me for sure. So yeah, I don't know, but I do like the fact that I then got the job and it was kind of rewarded, that behaviour, even if maybe it wasn't the best thing to do, but it turns out it was okay.
So get me to your Bitbar, because now I'm starting to realize that all of the things that you're doing do have that UI UX component. And I know with Pace, you were really pushing on Twitter the UI and UX that you had built. Like, I could tell from you how excited you were about, because it's a problem that had been solved already. Like, Pace is a problem that's been solved, and my brain even went, why is he jumping into this space? This problem's been solved. What does Matt see? But I'd love to try to get there in 15 minutes. But the Bitbar is just super interesting to me, because that's one of your bigger kind of products, right? Where your user base is in, you must have 1 million users at this point for Bitbar, right?
I actually don't know, because I don't track things like that, for rightly or wrongly. It has a lot, though, for sure. Well, it came about, I was living in Colorado at the time, and a friend of mine was into Bitbar. Sorry, he was into Bitcoin. And I bought some Bitcoin. Unfortunately, I sold them before it's worth what it's worth now. But I had these Bitcoin.
What year is this then? We're talking 2010?
Maybe
11?
13.
I'm trying to remember when Bitcoin even came out. 13?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I'm not very good. I don't, for some reason, remember the dates, history.
That's
like
fair.
That. Yeah. Well, and so I had these Bitcoin, and of course the price was changing all the time, and I wanted to just have a glance of the value that I could just glance up at the menu bar. So I started to use Objective-C to build that, and I remember struggling with making like web requests in Objective-C. Even today, if you Google how to, or search DuckDuckGo of how to just to make a web request, it's kind of surprisingly complex because it's quite low level, and these weren't solved in the way that they're served in modern languages like Go. And I knew how to do it with a curl command, so I thought what I'll do is I'll just shell out to this other script, and that also means that I could write other plugins for this just by an executable. It reads standard out and uses that to build the menu essentially, and the menu bar bits at the top. It's a dead simple API, and I liked the fact that I could do this work once, and in theory, in my head, other people could do it to add their own problems. Like, I don't know what they are, and there's something that appeals about that multiplication of your effort, or the value that you create, for its own sake. I was never thinking it would make money or get any serious interest. It was just to kind of put it on GitHub and make it available and just see. And people started writing plugins, and I think in the early days, there were just a few that people added, and some people were using it and they liked it, and fixing bugs and things. This was kind of my first experience of working in a open source situation. And then it got to the top of Hacker News one day, and suddenly, the number of plugins were just absurd. Like the amount of pull requests coming in and bug reports and things, because suddenly people are trying it in all different situations and really pushing it and stretching it to its limits. And I just I had to take a day off work to manage just sort of all this communication that I was getting, and so I kind of loved it that some of the things that people built blew my mind. One of them still remains my favorite is, remember, it gets the last 10 items from your clipboard. So you go about copy and pasting, you can drop down the menu, see the last things you copied and pasted, or copied, choose one to put it back into your current clipboard and then paste it, things like that. People, that could be a complete little application, but it was just a script. It was just a simple all the plugins are single files. Like the API is really simple for Bitbar, and
you created an ecosystem for people to be productive.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, this is powerful tooling at the end of the day. It didn't need to be complex.
Yeah. I think the fact that it was overly simple gave people, you're going to get more people. If your API is simple, it's going to get implemented more times. It's kind of obvious, really. But this extends also to, Go and other modern programming design. If you think about interfaces in Go and single method interfaces, the power of a single method interface, even versus just two methods, is much more powerful. So yeah, there's something in that, the fact that it is, and lots of people wanted it to do a lot more things, of course, and there were loads of pull requests for things, adding all these features, but they just made it kind of too complicated. And the other thing I learned was, if you can solve a problem in userland, then I'm not going to put it into the API. If there's a way to solve it in userland, then by default it won't go into the API, because you have more power that way. The users have then more.
Well, the power comes from two places, even if we're talking about single method interfaces. It's how generalized is the interface, because the more generalized it is, the more flexible and reusable it is, right? And so the one thing I get nervous about with interfaces sometimes is sometimes you need a strict interface like net.conf. It's not, right? It's representing a socket connection or a network connection. It doesn't need to be a reader. The problem is too many people go after that type of interface first, and they really miss out on the behavior, right? But Bitbar became this generalization tool with a level of flexibility that people could make it their own.
Yeah.
It is that single method interface at the end of the day, right?
Yeah.
Like, and it's so hard to get to that.
Yeah.
Well, one of the interesting things you told me one time was your compensation model for Bitbar. I just wanted you to share that because I find it really interesting, right? You said, don't give me money, and you put a link to what?
Yes. I needed some socks. I actually didn't have any socks. And yeah, I didn't want to take money. I thought because people were asking, that's the thing. Like, people were asking, oh, can we give you some money? Or, they didn't have GitHub sponsors at the time. I do now have it, and it is set up, so please do sponsor me. But yeah, I just happened to just be out of socks. Actually, all my socks had holes in, and it was really frustrating. And I didn't realize how many people would then buy me socks. So then I started getting shipments of these red socks. I just happened to have red socks was the thing. I picked them because it was like my mum being from Wales, the Welsh flag is the red dragon. And also there's other reasons too for red being particularly a nice colour here. And yeah, I just suddenly got way too many red socks, which I still have. I just still have loads of red socks. So that's why I often will be wearing red socks. It's just a numbers game. So still.
Yeah, it's a game. If you can catch Matt not wearing a red sock, like, I'll send you a gopher.
You
okay.
should send us some red socks.
We'll send you a pair of red
there's any
socks
left.
unused.
I may have them all. Yeah. The other thing that happened,
right.
just on this, finish this off. You remember the Amiga Format magazine I used to have with my dad?
I don't remember that one. I read Byte magazine, but I don't remember that one.
Is that a food? Is that a food
Personally,
magazine?
Byte, yeah.
Yeah.
BYTE, yeah.
Right. They do a smaller one called the Nibble pamphlet. It's like a pull-out. Well, yeah. So I stopped reading that magazine. Obviously, I didn't have an Amiga, and nor do they even exist anymore. So I think they stopped publishing them even. But there are other format magazines. There's like Windows format, I think. There's Mac format, and other gaming, maybe gaming ones. I'm not sure. And then randomly, I bought one just randomly, and I'd stopped reading them. And I remember I was lying on my bed, and I was just flicking through it, and I literally did an sharp intake of breath, because there was this double-page spread on Bitbar. It was like, power up your Mac menu bar, and it was like a tutorial, and they'd written all about it, and I was just, I felt like I'd made it, that this was the magazine I used to read, and I didn't know it was going to be in there, and I'd only bought it, and for years I hadn't bought that magazine, and I was just grabbed it by pure chance, and that was it, and it was there, Bitbar.
It's the universe,
I
Matt, just making sure that you saw it. I
Yeah,
do believe
must
that
be.
sometimes. The universe coalesces us sometimes in these interesting moments, or either that or the
Definitely.
voice in the back of your head telling you, do it, do it, do it, do it.
It definitely felt like wow, couldn't fathom that, and I love so that was like, that stays with me as like one of those moments of like, okay, wow, that was great. And actually, as I mentioned before, we are now doing a rewrite of Bitbar, and I can, if you like, I could exclusively reveal its new name. It is getting a new name, actually.
Okay.
It's going to be called X-Bar.
X-Bar. Nice.
Yeah, it's just
Why do you want to
X,
change the
it's
name?
cool.
Why do you want to change the name?
There's a few other companies. There's a few other tech companies and things called Bitbar, and I feel like they were there before. This was like a small project. I didn't really expect anyone to see it, so I didn't do any diligence or checking to make sure the name was unique and things. But so yes, that X-Bar is unique, and it's going to be new, rewrite
Nice.
in Go. Yeah, fresh code base, and fully open source and fully free for everybody as usual.
All right, so
but it'll be
we're an hour in. I'm going to keep you for 15 more minutes, Matt, because I've been trying to get us to this one place that I really want to explore with you. And we could keep, there's so much here I still want to talk to you about, but I want to get to, not in major detail, but Machinebox and Pace. I want to talk about, but I really want to talk about, so the people listening to this can get a good sense of how do you come up with these ideas? How do you execute on them so quickly? It's not easy to do. Anybody listening to this, I want you to spend the next half an hour to an hour thinking about what product could you build? And imagine you had all the money to build it. I'm not even talking about execution. Can you think of a product right now that you could build that people need and want, that you could also dog food? I do it all the time, and I just never come up with that. And then I open up my browser, and Matt's got Machinebox, and then Matt's got Pace. And he starts showing off the UI, and he starts showing off the workflows, and he starts showing off the problem he's solving. And my brain goes, where did that come from? So I want you to talk a little bit about where these ideas come from, your inspiration come from. How do you execute it? What's your priorities here, and how you do that? I want to spend the last 15 minutes so others that are trying to do this maybe have some guidance and insight into what's allowed you to be, and I'm going to say it, successful in doing something that's incredibly difficult to do.
Well, I think the key insight. I think the key thing I learned is, if you want to be like a 10x developer, just do a tenth of the project. just find the most important small, be very strict and small about what you're doing that on that scope, because then you can just do such a good job on that piece. You know, it's kind of like you could have this wide thing where you're going to solve all these problems, but you won't be able to solve them all in a very deep way, right? Because it ends up being shallow because you just don't have that time. If you can just find a much smaller subset, you then can do a lot more. You can go a lot deeper on that thing. And I think that by the depth, I'm really talking about paying attention a lot to developer experience or user experience. Those extra value add things you get to do because you're not busy adding all the features that you need because you feel like this thing won't be very good without all this stuff.
So give me an example. Give me an example of what is the one focused thing you did first with Machinebox. And Machinebox was an automated machine learning platform that you could just plug into, right, on the cloud.
Yeah,
and then Pace.
Well, yeah. So Machinebox. So David Hernandez gets credit for the initial idea for Machinebox. We were working at an AI company, and we were using Google APIs and Amazon APIs and things like this, and they get quite expensive, especially if you start to think about at scale running this stuff. You know, we were like thinking about processing video content and using AI to understand the videos. There's lots of companies that have big archives and they don't know what's in them. And it wasn't well organized up front, so they're kind of stuck. So that was the problem that the company was solving. And David actually said, we might be able to do this inside a Docker container and just have an API. And so when we started, he built the prototype of face recognition, and I think he did image classification. And they're very small problems. It wasn't a general AI tool. It wasn't like TensorFlow or something, you know. It was, again, much smaller little slithers of the problem, really. And that meant, like, once the face recognition stuff was working, we could then spend a lot of time on that developer experience. And Dave Cheney actually gave me a great compliment on that. He said that it's one of the best developer experiences of anything he's ever used. And it was because, like, you'd go to the website, you'd put your email address in, it sends you an email. So it was the magic link sign in. So there's no passwords already, you know. You're given the commands to paste into your terminal, you know, including a key, a dedicated key for you. It was all just there. You put it in the terminal. If you have Docker running, it then installs the image, downloads the image and runs it, and then it spins up a web browser or a web server inside the Docker container. And that then is where you carry on with the experience. So now it tells you go to localhost 8080. So now you're in the browser and the experience carries on. And there's like tutorials sort of built into the docs and things like that. So it's really thinking about that storytelling, that experience, and also trying to get the developers excited as we get excited by this tech. Show some of the capabilities, and then and kind of paint this picture. Let them color this picture in and use their own data and start to solve their own problems and make that really easy. And you know, you can, because we weren't doing like face recognition plus audio processing, you know, and all the myriad of things that you can use AI to do. We were just focused. Each box was to set a very specific focus, which allowed us to tell a really simple story around it. So that's always my advice to people. It's often, in fact, most people are basically trying to do too much. You know, when you consider the first iPhone, you couldn't put your own apps on it. You didn't have like an app store. That today seems like not good enough, doesn't it? It doesn't feel like a good enough product now. But back then, I mean, they sold, 1.6 billion, if I remember, iPhones. And it's because they just sort of, I don't know, not trying to do everything, focus on. And sometimes I say, well, they say, well, our one thing is quite big because it only is going to work with all these pieces. And then I'll ask people, well, what's the half thing that you could build then? Like that as an exercise is I think very valuable. It forces you to prioritize the important bits. You can't just spend ages building everything.
But it still has to be useful, Matt. Like, you could build the one thing, but if it's not useful, then, right? And I think that's the hard part. We talk about MVPs all the time, which are minimal viable product, but I think it also has to come down to the usefulness of solving that micro problem that you're talking about.
Yeah.
And I'm curious if you've ever tried to build a product. There's two questions here. My first quick one is, did you ever try to build a product that wasn't solving a problem you had, that you thought others had, even though you didn't have it? I've made that. I don't want to call it a mistake, but I've been down that path, and it wasn't a very successful path for me. You have to be able to dog food, I think, what you're doing, right?
It's so much harder if you're not building it for yourself, because you really have to get into the mind of the person with that problem. And often, it's not just about features and stuff. It's really emotional. Like when you're using software, how frustrating it is. Sometimes my trackpad stops working just randomly. I want to discus that trackpad into the water, into the Thames, mate. Just straight. It's an emotional thing. It's some Bluetooth connectivity or something technical, but I don't care about that. I'll pop it in a blender. I'll happily pop it in a blender to destroy it. That's how I feel about it. And I think that's right. I think instead of, it's like, oh, we shouldn't be so emotional. It's like, well, what? We're humans. It is emotional. Building, using software is emotional. So if you can try and make people happy, that's quite a good goal, like as a mission for a piece of software. And I extend that to my Go package design as well. I want people to kind of smile when they're using it, if possible.
For me, that happiness, I think, I could be wrong here. The happiness comes in terms of not wasting a second of my time, especially now that I'm 51. Because I don't have a lot of time left, right? I always imagine myself sitting on my deathbed thinking about all the time I wasted, and the last thing I want to be thinking about is how Matt Ryer wasted 5 minutes of my time because he didn't get that feature right, And I think happiness sometimes comes from the fact that you're being so productive with minimal effort that you get to do more in those 5 minutes than maybe you did in the last hour.
Yeah, I think you're right. Time is a thing for sure, and things like with Bitbar, I love building little tools, and so Bitbar enables people, or Xbar enables people to do that as well, and that's a very fun process. So I think people are having fun when they write plugins for Bitbar. I don't think they are doing it. I don't think there's many that are doing it because it's their job. They have to do it. It's
So here's my other in that for sure. Here's my other question. Yeah, and I think having fun and having that positive experience on top of time is important. But my other question that I want to ask you is that, and I don't have this mindset, which I think you do. When I'm building something or engineering something for the first time, I do think about the person who has to come after me to maintain it. But I don't think about it as a product first. In other words, that it could also be used to solve somebody else's problem, or could be used in somebody else's shop. I don't think we do that enough as an industry, right? I mean, Slack came about from a tool that was used to solve a problem with the company that was trying to build games or something, right? Like, does your brain first kind of move into the idea that I'm not just going to write this for me, I'm going to write it in a way that it can be for everybody? Do you have that instinct?
That's a really interesting question, because I think when I'm designing a Go package, or if I have to write a Go package for something that I need, I think it can be a mistake to try and build this abstract version of it that could be useful by everybody. I actually think it's better practice to build what you need first, and then later see if there's something else. That's kind of what I did with Bitbar Xbar. Was I needed it because I wanted to see my Bitcoin in my menu bar. That's what I built first. In doing that, I was guided. Like my effort was guided because I had a thing I needed to get to quickly. And I think there's a sense of is there a way to make it slightly abstract it very slightly that will enable that? Are there any? It's kind of like you can definitely go too far with that. I mean, it's something that premature abstraction in programming, I think, is one of the big sins that we do suffer from, which is why I'm very careful about this. But there is something. Sometimes it'll jump out. And or it's. I read once that creativity is connecting things that haven't been connected before. That's it. That's the basically broad definition of creativity. And so I bear that in mind too. It's like, given this, are there any other things that could be mixed with in some way that suddenly kind of creates something that's much greater than the sum of those two parts?
So what I'm hearing is, and I teach this all the time, you build in the concrete first, and then discover that abstraction. Discover where you can open up or have a second implement. But so you do that already. Whether it's a UI UX based product or it's a package, or you build in the concrete first, you get that concrete solution working for you, and then you ask, all right, is this something that somebody else could use, and how can we discover the changes we need to make?
Yeah, it is. Sometimes, with experience, sometimes you can do that quicker in your head. So sometimes I'll see it already, and I'll just do it. I'll just do that first. I agree with the advice for sure, because often that abstraction isn't right, very often, and you learn so much from building it that you can only really do a good job of that abstraction once that's well underway. So I completely agree with that advice. But sometimes I'll think, this is just a choice here. Like it's not a lot more effort. It's just a choice of how I implement this, and I can get a sense that it's kind of future-proofing this in some way, or keeping those doors open for the future, not closing things off. So that it's hard to articulate when that happens, but sometimes I've noticed, we'll say, it's a choice. It's the same amount of effort. I could either spend ages figuring out how to make web requests in Objective-C, or I could figure out how to run a sub-process in Objective-C. Same probably amount of time to get those two things to happen, but one of them unlocks and enables others, and the other one wouldn't.
I know you work a lot with David Hernandez, right? You've been a team for a long time. Is he part of your sounding board? Are there other people that you have around you that you kind of bounce these ideas before you put too much effort into them? Or are you at the point now where you're doing this for 20-something years and your instincts can really drive your decisions?
Yeah, I've found if I try and explain things to other people, they often just won't see it. they won't get it. I remember explaining the Bitbar idea to somebody, and they put me off because they didn't get it, or it wasn't something that resonated. So I don't tend to do it too much. I do now trust my instincts on this. Obviously, with David, that is a collaboration. He's very difficult to get him excited about something, and so that can be tough. But it also means when he does get excited about something, you're like, okay, we're onto something here, So it's a very useful gate for sure. But now I am reaching the point where, and after our Machinebox, because obviously I don't know if your listeners or watchers know, but we sold Machinebox. That was like our biggest kind of commercial success that I've ever had. And so now things are different. I now don't have to work for a paycheck. So that now there's a kind of freedom there to do that, and I do trust increasingly my instincts on things, and don't need others to validate it too early, if that makes sense, because obviously the validation's vital, but I do feel like I've started now to trust myself more on that and not feel so much like an imposter.
Right.
So I've got other projects that are they're different. They're not ready to be talked about yet, but I have other things that are going to be coming, which I feel like are very original ideas, and I'm very excited about them. And if I speak to somebody and they say, "Oh no, that's rubbish. That wouldn't be good," that I won't let that stop me. I won't let that put me off. I take that as, okay, that's what they think, completely valid. But yeah, I think you do sort of have to trust yourself.
All right, I'm going to take 12 more minutes, even though this is now an hour and a half, because there are things. There's really one more question I want to get your thoughts on, because when you announced Pace, which is a workflow tool, right, for people who are project management workflow tool. I mean, you could use it for anything. You don't have to use it for software development, though I imagine it's a little bit tailored towards that. But the first thought that entered into my head, Matt, was, why is he putting time and money into a space that's crowded, established, because you've got to get companies to jump off of Jira. And it's a problem that's been solved. So that would have been almost in my head the very first, no, I ain't doing it. I'm going to make what's out there work, because this wheel already exists. I want to know, I really did want to know from you, what was that even an issue for you? Did you study the landscape when you decided to do this, or you just said, I need this tool and these don't have it and I'm going to put the time in it? Like, what's going on in your head? Because for me, I went, Matt's crazy. What is he doing? The space is the space.
Yeah, well, it is a very crowded space, and really, it was basically like the problems that I'd had throughout my career with project management tools, and really, it comes down to the organizations, the structures within organizations. I think. I don't like them for whatever reason, and we've actually talked about this a few times before. I've just seen there's lots of cases where the organisation just gets in the way, and I have something to say about product. I also have something to say about the technical side. I care about the UI. I care about the colours in the browser. I care about the database and the messaging queue. I care about all these things, and it's very natural, I think. But in organizations, these responsibilities get divided up, and what can happen, and does happen a lot, is project managers become like the most powerful people in a team, and will often by accident design the software, basically design the technical things of the software just by what they choose to write in their Jira tickets. And I don't just mean when they'll say, we'll have a button here and we call this and you click it and it does this, or sometimes even like put this in the SQL database. They'll say things like this, not just that, but even just the choice, even just that work, that product of deciding what's the priority here, what things are we going to have, and what are we not going to have. Sometimes more importantly, those decisions all impact the engineering and the technology. And I've read your stuff about mechanical sympathy, and I think that's such a great thing that people should read about, because they have a perspective of this is something, it suits the business, and there's customers and the sales people are all saying this, that these customers want this feature, and the creativity or the opportunity to solve a problem using your own and the team's own collective talent is taken away. And I found that to happen too many times. And it could be that I should just have a product role, like maybe that's the solution to it. But Pace was about changing the way, shifting the power away from, or shifting the power a little bit and distributing it around a little more. That's really the way to do it. One example is in Pace, you can't assign work to other people, for example. You can only accept responsibility. So as a value prop, that as a value, I mean like a kind of philosophical value, changes so much the way that teams operate. And I've seen it in positive ways because I've run teams before, and I've experimented with things like this. When you have people pulling work rather than it being pushed, not only are they choosing the things that they're most interested in, so just naturally everyone's interested in what they're working on. Mostly, obviously there's always work that no one wants to do, and that becomes abundantly clear too in this process. But there's also naturally people will they'll want to work on the things that they know they can do a good job on. So it's a shortcut to having the right people work on the right things. And we just saw that there's this philosophy, and there's a few other examples of features like that in Pace, which to some people are just limitations that mean they won't use it. But for other teams, we hear from them, they love it. And you still will mention somebody in a card. You create cards and say there's some work here. You mention somebody's like, could you have a look at this? But it's a conversation. It's not just work being dished out, and developers aren't just on a conveyor belt knocking out widgets. They're an active part of that project management process.
That's super interesting, because I always, when I did manage dev teams, I always operated that way. I always said, these are the next things that need to get done. Who wants to do what? Because if I asked somebody to do something, they didn't want to do it, I wasn't going to get quality work out of it anyway. Now, no. I may need to negotiate every once in a while and say, can you please just take this thing, and I promise you that I'm going to set this other thing up over here for you, right? And that happens. Even teams that I didn't manage, where we were using Jira, they operated the same way. We were successful teams. So that's super interesting. So you've changed the workflow from a dictatorship to allowing the developer in that session to grab it, as opposed to asking the PM, okay, fine, assign that to me.
Yes. It does something else as well. In that conversation, there's often valuable insights. So it happens, people will mention somebody and say, could you have a look at this? And then they'll say, oh, do you know what? John should do that, or Mary is perfect. She did the last thing. She knows about this, or maybe we'll pair on it or something, There's a lot of that knowledge that is trapped if you aren't doing it that way. It's really interesting to hear you do it that's how you operated, because you've kind of learned, and you know yourself, right? Because you were a developer and are. So you know yourself that when you care about something, you're going to do such a good job on it compared to just getting through it. And you're right, sometimes that's unavoidable, but at least that you can be honest about that. At least then you're saying, look, I know no one wants to do auth. No one wants to implement this auth thing. If you do it, we'll be very grateful. And next time there's this horrible task comes along, you're off the hook. You get to it just makes it better. It's healthier. Yeah.
It's creating empathy from a management to a team, which is good. So, I have 4 more minutes with you. Are you going to actively do any? I'm on the business side now. Because it sounds like you're building other things at the same time. So, is your goal to actively do some sales and marketing to try to get even some share of the market space for new teams and new companies, and maybe even companies that are frustrated with their existing tooling? Or is it just out there and you're using it, and if people use it, great, and if it happens, great? What are you looking at from a business perspective here?
Yeah, we're definitely we aren't naturally gonna push and sell and market in that way. The success that we've had has come about by building things that people have needed, and then we haven't had to sell or convince people to use it. But in reality, that you do need to do that. People have to find out about it. They have to understand the value prop and things. So yes, this year actually is the year where we're going to be pushing more those products. We have our kind of early adopters using it, and the feedback from real users is so valuable, as you know. So not only do we dog food it, but we have other people using it, and we're able to test our assumptions. Sometimes some of our assumptions are wrong. Some things where we think, because it's a minimalist tool, it's a really minimalist, deliberately. The goal of Pace is that you don't spend really any time in it. You spend your time doing your work, because we think that's more valuable. So it's about kind of trying to do just enough for teams to help them, but make sure that we are doing enough too, because it is very minimalist. And so it's that balance that we're doing and we're working on. One of the things that changed after we sold Machinebox is now investors come to us, because before it used to be we'd go to investors to try and get and convince them and stuff. It's the classic Silicon Valley story. That shifted a little bit, we noticed, because I think you sort of demonstrated you can do it, and so of course it's kind of natural. It doesn't feel entirely fair, because there's plenty of talented people that can't raise money and things like this. But so we're lucky, really, and all our options are on the table. So it is just about kind of for us seeing where we want to put those energies and see what works. I mean, some of it we do, a lot of it we do for the love of it. We frankly built Pace for the love of it. If anyone hasn't tried it, I promise it's probably the fastest project management tool. The UI is probably the fastest you'll use, and it's live sync and things like this. So it's really cool tech that just does a really good job of it. And we didn't build all of it. We're using services in the right place and things like this, but we do it as well because of the love of the tech, and now being somewhat more relaxed about having to make money. We don't have that. We don't have that
stress.
And the stress, which it sometimes can be helpful. So, but it gives us space to take our time and get it right. And we took the search feature out because we took it out, and launched it as its own product, which is our Firesearch thing. Because we had to build search for Pace, or rather we kind of wanted to. and there wasn't this kind of serverless search capability. Google on App Engine used to have a search API, and they deprecated it. So we built Firesearch, which is Firesearch.dev. That is, you run it in Cloud Run. It uses Firestore, Google's Firebase data store thing, and uses that as the backing for full text search and geo search and a few other kind of autocomplete, a few kind of features like that. So that was another thing. We didn't build it for that originally, but we realized people were asking us actually what search service you're using, because we talk quite openly about the fact that it runs on App Engine and things, and we have to tell them we made our own, but we were so pleased with it that we wrapped it up and put that out as its own product, and it's like got really simple APIs and nice clients and things like this, so we're able to, again, because it's quite a small project, do a good job on that. But we love building things and creating things. We don't love so much selling them. So I think partnerships and things like this are probably going to be in our future, where we can find people that love doing that and are good at that side of things, that can then free us to do the creative.
Brilliant. All right, we are out of time. So I'd
shame.
like to. Yeah, no, we could talk. We could always talk, but we already went an hour and a half, which I've never done. But there was too much here that I wanted to explore. So I want to do two things in the last 2 minutes. If anyone listening to this really has the desire to be an entrepreneur, really has a desire to build product, really has a desire on that, and need to talk to somebody. Matt, I'd like to, you're very open, you're very accessible. I would like to say to people, DM Matt, he'll give you 20 minutes, half an hour of his time. He really will. Matt, I think from a Go community, let's say a tech community perspective, you're one of the few people I know who really are a serial entrepreneur. You've been very successful here, and I think it's nice to be able to talk to people, especially early on when you're trying this. So I don't know if it's okay, but I'm going to send people your way if they have questions and things. This isn't a product pitch. Don't go to Matt about that. This is more about the entrepreneurial side of not making maybe a few of those mistakes early on that we all make. And then, Matt, maybe you can tell everybody best way to reach out to you or contact you if they have questions after listening to this.
Yeah, well, I'm very happy for people to reach out. I actually really enjoy it, and I learn a lot from that process too. So it's a kind of win-win from my point of view. And yeah, Twitter DMs is actually the best way, @MattRyer. That's, I spend a lot of time on Twitter. I actually got great friends on Twitter, actually. So that's where I am kind of socially. And I just want to also say, Bill, thank you for everything you do, particularly for the Go community, but wider tech. I mean, the Go community in particular, I mentioned my mum earlier and her love, her care of social justice and, diversity and feminism and all these issues. It's a very important thing to me, and I know that you do a lot of work to support people. Also, like Brian Kettleston and Eric St. Martin from GopherCon, made it a big part of GopherCon, these things too. And it really is one of the reasons why I stick around in this community so much, because I think it's so important, and just want to go on the record for saying thanks. I don't think you get thanked enough. I've heard lots of stories of things that you do above and beyond that really, really does help a lot of people. And so I think it's great. And please let me know and let us know how we can help more as well.
Thank you, Matt. No, I appreciate that. Yep. Well, the best way is what do we say in Letterkenny? You don't say no to your friends. So somebody asks you for help, you find a way to help them. Right? I mean, I think that's one of the best things that we can do. So, all right, our time is up, unfortunately. But Matt, I really appreciate the hour and a half you spent with us today. This is Bill Kennedy with the Ardan Labs podcast. Hope to see everybody again real soon.